Nigel, you're ready to go?
Okay, thank you very much, Matt. Right, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the December meeting of the North Norfolk District Council Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Our first item on the agenda today, well, before I get to that, I will just cover the matters of protocols. I'm sure you're relatively familiar now with the way in which we need to operate as far as remote meetings are concerned. Make sure your telephones are switched off, and if you do need to get up and move around, then for those committee members who will have their video on all the time, would you turn your videos off? And could I ask those who are observing to keep their videos off until such time as they're invited to speak, and for everybody else to keep their audios on mute. I think that's probably as much as I need to go into today. So turning then to the agenda. First item is to receive apologies. Matt.
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Andrew Brown and Councillor Harry Blathwaite.
Thank you. Moving on to substitutes.
Unfortunately, none were able to attend.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I then, I think we've had appointees were Andrew Brown and Peter Fisher, is that correct, Councillor Fisher, and Councillor Cushing?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so welcome Councillor Cushing to your first meeting as a committee member. I know you've attended as an observer before, but today, thank you for attending. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Moving then to public questions and statements. I'm not aware of any.
None received.
Thank you. Item 4 is the minutes of our last meeting. So if we can just turn to those minutes. So that's starting on page 1. We go through them first of all for accuracy. Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Does anybody have any queries with regard to the accuracy of those? No, I see no queries. Could we just take a vote then on accepting those minutes as being accurate for that meeting? Just raise your hands if you would, please.
Okay, that looks unanimous for those that were there, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I will sign those as accurate. Okay, turning to item 5, items of urgent business. I'm not aware of any items of urgent business.
None received.
Item 6, declarations of interest. Does anybody have any matters that they would wish to declare in relation to today's business, please? No? Okay, thank you very much. Turning to item 7, petitions from members of the public. I'm not aware of any.
None received.
Thank you. Item 8, consideration of any matter referred to the committee by a member. I'm not aware of any.
Again, none received.
Thank you. Item 9, responses of the council or the cabinet to the committee's reports or recommendations.
I don't believe there's been any substantive recommendations given to either of those committees. It's just been commending reports already going forward through the Cabinet Scrutiny Council cycle.
Right, okay, thank you for that. Turning to item 10, fees and charges. Is it, Steve, are you as the Chief Executive speaking to this?
I think we've got Eric and Lucy in attendance.
Okay, right. Yes, indeed. Who wishes to go first? Councillor Seward or Officer Hume?
Thank you, Chairman. This report went before the Cabinet last week. It's a report that normally goes through the committee cycle at this time of year. It's done in order that if there are any changes in fees and charges, that is done in good time so they can be actually implemented. The details are contained in the report. The only thing I think I probably need to say is that with regard to those fees and charges which this council determines, we've, as far as possible, frozen them this year. That includes car parking charges, given the pandemic situation and the challenging economic outlook that our local economy faces. So that's all I need to say, Chairman, by way of introduction.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Seward, for that. Officer Hume, would you wish to add anything to what's already been said in terms of introducing these items?
No, I think, Chair, everything's been covered satisfactorily.
Okay, thank you for that. I throw it open then for members for discussion. Does anybody wish to raise any items in relation to this? Okay, I see
Councillor Housden. Yep.
Housden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just ask on point 2.4, some fees are not published as part of this process, such as those relating to trade waste collection. Is this anything to do with the software which was inoperative as discussed in the previous overview and scrutiny meeting? That's the software which I think runs between the cab or the actual vehicles and the central monitoring situation. Is that anything to do with that?
Who wishes to respond to that?
I don't believe that it is.
Councillor Lloyd?
Sorry, Councillor Lloyd, beg your pardon.
Councillor Lloyd?
Sorry, I thought I'd unmuted myself. Do you mind repeating the question again, Councillor Housden?
Yes. 2.4 is fees relating to trade waste collection and garden bin fees. This is due to the fact that some of the costs are not known this early in the year. I'm slightly not understanding something, I think, or is it the fact that the software which was implemented with the new waste contract hasn't been activated yet?
Thank you. I get it now. No, it's nothing to do with software. This is a service that the council offers on a competitive basis. In actual fact, earns quite a lot of revenue for the council. The fees and charges need to be delayed pretty much each year. This is the same situation in actual fact, because gate fees at the recycling centres change and modify, and we have to keep cognizant of those before we actually set the fees. And also, you know, this is a competitive market, and publishing our fees this early in the year probably not a great thing to do in terms of revenue making. Does that answer your question, Councillor Housden?
Yep, fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Lloyd. Any other questions? I have one which I'm aware of has been mentioned in discussions, and that relates to the matter of car parking fees and whether, well, I'll expand it beyond car park fees really, but it certainly was raised in conversation with regard to car park fees and whether any consideration had been given to reducing fees and charges, particularly in the light of the impact of COVID-19. And I think the context of the matter on car park fees was on the basis of having reduced car park fees for a period of time. The impact of that was to actually increase the revenue received from those car parking sites, and to that extent had a benefit in terms of the revenue received for car parking fees. Now, whether that's anecdotal or whether that is statistically, whether there is evidence to support that, I'm not clear, but I just wonder whether a conversation has taken place on whether there would be any merit in reducing fees of that kind. Does anybody wish to respond to that in officer or cabinet member?
I'm happy to comment on that, Chair, if that would be helpful.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
So I don't believe there has been any active consideration of reducing car park fees. Formally, we do have data for the summer period where we've got data throughout the year on individual car parks, and that's analysis that we could share with ONS in January for such a discussion if that would be helpful. The general pattern of income over the summer is that seaside or coastal car parks were ahead of usual normal annual income. I set aside from the period when the national lockdown was in April and May, but during July, August and September, income in coastal car parks was ahead of other years, whereas the income for inland towns was down. There might be some local circumstances for that. Obviously, the council agreed 2-hour free parking in Holt for the month of July in response to the Budgeons fire, and in conjunction with the social distancing measures that were implemented in North Horsham Marketplace, 1-hour free parking was provided on a part of the Bank Loke car park, which would have impacted on takings there, because inland towns, most of the income is for short stay visits rather than long stay visits. And in the early part of the year, this year, between January and the national lockdown on the 27th of March, North Horsham also had some major gas works, and so free parking was provided for 2 hours on 2 of the town's car parks, Vicarage Street and Bank Loke. So you're not comparing consistently with previous years, but there is some strong data that could be shared and presented for discussion by Overview and Scrutiny Committee in January if the committee feels that would be helpful. And that is something that has been discussed with certainly the leader of the council in recent days in the context of the preparation of next year's budget. And so that data is available and could be made available for discussion by the committee if that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you for that, Steve. My recollection, and I may be slightly awry on this, but I believe it might well have related to car parks in Sheringham. I don't know whether Councillor Withington has any experience of that, but or whether anybody else wants to contribute to that wider discussion. Councillor Withington.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Steve, for that explanation. I think it's an interesting discussion to be had, in that I think traders are very appreciative, will be very appreciative, and the community appreciative of no rise costs. But I think it would be good to see that for the community to have seen that we've had that discussion and about whether it is economically viable for the council to give some free parking for the half hours or what have you, to show that we're at least thinking about the independent town centres. If it's not viable, it's not viable then, but we've had that discussion, and I think we can be seen to be supporting the community if possible.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Withington. Officer Blatch, would you wish to respond?
So I think there's two issues here, Chair, members of the committee. Obviously, the government has proposed or is able to, or has indicated its support through until the 31st of March, that there is a loss of income compensation scheme for the local authority, which as an authority we have submitted a return for. And there are two further returns, one to the end of this calendar year and one to the end of March. And the accountants are working on the next claim now. If there's any change to our prevailing policy in this financial year to address the issues of COVID, that wouldn't be eligible under the government scheme. Obviously, if you looked at wanting to change policy formally for the council from a point in the new financial year, that's a matter of choice for this authority based on priorities, the business, the strength of the local economy, or the authority's provision of other services. Because whilst I understand the point that Councillor Withington raises, obviously being an area that's highly tourism dependent, this authority does have a lot of other costs, provision of public toilets, blue flag beaches, high frequency public cleansing in high amenity areas, which needs to be paid for through some mechanism. And that's either through levels of council tax, which there are capping limits upon, or the ability to levy other charges, including car park charges. So those are the choices that we as a council have in setting fees and charges for the next financial year. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you for that, Steve. Certainly the paper that we are considering is, of course, looking at the charges that would apply from the 1st of April 21 through to 22. So I rather suspect that we are already set in our pattern for the rest of this financial year. Not quite sure how long the COVID cost recovery is going to last, but you're right, that's a separate issue. I think what we're looking at here is taking perhaps a more optimistic line on what the recovery of COVID-19 might look like post-vaccinations, whether there was any scope and any merit in looking at whether there was evidence around the car parks, whether there would be any merit in considering reductions along the lines that I've raised. But anybody else wants to contribute to that? Councillor Seawood.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, well, I mean, all I was going to say is that on the basis of the financial information available to me and to the council, in terms of this year's budget, we have a balanced budget in spite of the immense challenges that we have faced. And in terms of next year, the position at the moment is, you will know from the members' briefing, we're also heading for a balanced budget. And therefore, from the point of view of financial viability, there is no need, as we see it at the current time, to actually increase parking charges. And for the reasons that I've already stated, I think that if we don't need for increased charges from a financial point of view, then we shouldn't do in what is currently an economically challenging situation. You will also appreciate that parking income, it's somewhere around £2 million a year. It's a lot of the services we provide, particularly the optional services, are dependent on that income. And if you want those services to continue, we have to have an income source for them. But in the circumstances in which we're faced, I think what the administration is trying to do is to be as helpful as possible to local businesses and to the economic climate in which we're operating. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that, Councillor Stewart. Just to be clear, though, there was no question of increasing the charges. The question that has been raised is in relation to whether there was any a case or any merit in reducing charges that would both incentivize people to use the car parks more, perhaps benefit traders along the way, and if it is the case that there has been increased revenue received from those car parks, then there would be some merit in considering that. And it was just really a discussion to explore whether that's anecdotally supported by factual evidence in various locations or not. If not, then that would be the end of the matter. So it's really a matter of whether it's been explored with those considerations in mind. I've got Councillor Heinrich.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Chairman, and certainly we shouldn't be increasing charges. We've got to give some benefit to shop owners and hospitality businesses. But I just make it a point that our short-term charges are actually remarkably low in comparison with those in many authorities. Now, £1 for 2 hours in North Walsham does not seem to me to be excessive. And you know, if we look elsewhere, you can pay double that, sometimes a lot more. So we're not overcharging our residents, and certainly by not increasing it, we're not putting any further penalty on them during this rather difficult time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Does anybody else want to speak on the matter?
I see no further hands raised.
Okay. Well, having raised the question and having had a discussion, is there any appetite, any wish on the part of members to hear more, as Officer Blatch indicated that there was further information available if we wanted to consider that in January, or do you want to simply let matters stand as they are on the existing scale of charges? Any views on that? Councillor Howson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I always think it's worth having the figures. At least if we've got them, we can just cast an eye over them and raise any questions that we might have. I think it's beneficial to do so. That's what overview and scrutiny is about, certainly.
Okay, any others that think similarly? Councillor Cushing.
Yes, I'd agree, Mr. Chairman. It's not do any harm at all to see some more figures and give us some more information, so I'd certainly endorse that proposal.
Any other views? Anybody speaking against it? Okay, if there is a consensus, then I think if I've picked up the essence of the issue, we would like to explore whether there is any merit or any evidence that suggests that car parking fees, having been reduced in the past, have produced better revenues, or indeed to give us a better level of information on car parking fees, as you outlined, Mr. Blatch. So if we ask for that to be included in our January meeting, that would be in a timely fashion to consider any implications if we wanted to in respect of this agenda item. But for the time being, there doesn't seem to be any question of making any further recommendations as far as Cabinet is concerned, unless anybody has any other ideas. No? Okay, are you content then to, I think we are required to, is that to note these?
We're recommending this report to full council, so you will just need to take a vote on that.
A formal vote?
Nigel and Christopher as proposing and seconding that request for the additional information, which, just a suggestion, could be included as part of the budget setting information. Were you two happy to support the kind of standing recommendations?
Is that, yes, does anybody dissent from that? So if we take a vote on accepting the recommendations as they stand, with one additional recommendation for the additional information that will come to us in January, is that correct?
Correct, yeah. So I'll just go through the roll call. So
Thank you.
Councillor Dixon.
For.
Councillor Withington.
For.
Councillor Fredericks.
For.
Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Housden.
For.
Councillor Mancini Boyle.
For.
Councillor Spagnola.
For.
Councillor Varley.
For.
And Councillor Cushing.
For.
Okay, that's unanimous.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Moving on to item 11, managing performance for Q2, that's 2020-2021. Who wishes to speak on this? Was this, I think we've got Councillor Batikova. Would you like to open on that one then, please, Sarah?
Yes, good morning, Chairman, thank you. So this is the Managing Performance Q2 report. You will see that obviously Q2 ended a couple of months ago, so things have moved on since then. But I have to say that Q2 was still very much during the time when we were responding to the pandemic. It was also the time when we saw a huge amount of influx into the area by visitors, which was good because it helped our tourist economy. But obviously officers then had to deal with a lot of extra work with waste, as you will have seen and heard probably around the coastal areas in particular, and with the extra activities such as the fogging. So the environmental team were particularly impacted during this period. But I'm very happy to take any questions if anyone's got any. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Councillor Batikova. Questions then on the managing performance? Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All I just really repeat a point I made in Cabinet, which I think Councillor Batikova probably agreed with me, and that's around the timeliness of the report. If any MI is produced in order for the purposes of monitoring and control, I do think we need to try and make more effort to get that more recent information, because I know in Cabinet I asked a question, can't remember what I asked one, but the answer I got was, well, actually the world's moved on now and that's not relevant. Well, if that's the case, then there's not really, we're not going to gain too much out of analysing the information in front of us. So I know a request was made to see whether we can get it to be more up to date. Sort of struggle to understand why we can't, because though each of the actions have owners, ultimately the portfolio holder for each of the tranches in the corporate plan are the ultimate owners. So I thought something could have been done there to get some more relevant MI to us. So happy for your thoughts, or indeed Councillor Butikova's further thoughts on that, or indeed Mr. Blanchard's.
Thank you for that. Councillor Batikova.
Thank you. I think for me, it's very much, I absolutely understand where you're coming from, Councillor Cushing. I come from a world a bit like yours, where I'm looking at performance reports and they need to be immediate because of the results. It doesn't, one of the things I have found when I've moved into the public sector is the reports work on a very different date order and in a different world. And I think there's maybe a happy medium between the two, and I think we need to look at that. And I've already spoken to Mr. Blatch about that and how we can move that forward. But it is about finding the happy medium, because also I hear what you're saying. Maybe we need to look at the way the reports are the data's completed so that we could have them sooner. Very happy to keep looking at that, because I do understand your frustrations. In some ways I share them, but I also understand why we have the reports the way we do at the moment. So we'll keep looking at that, and perhaps that's something that we you as Overview and Scrutiny might like to look at in the future. So let's keep talking about it, and let's see if we can move it forward, because I do understand, but I do also understand that I think it's important that this group have the ability to look at the reports, and it is the generally accepted way in the public sector. It's not as if North Norfolk is any different to any other district or county council. They do all look at the reports retrospectively. It's just a different world, but I do understand.
Will the world change with the introduction of the new, and I can't remember the name, is it InPhase?
InPhase. So to add to Councillor Boutikofer's comments and address the substantive point that Councillor Cushing raised, I think there is a difference between management information, which, as Councillor Cushing has suggested, should drive change of behaviour to look at any areas of weakness or where we fall below targets. And then that's different to performance information. And I think what this is more, performance information is more retrospective in terms of sharing with you where the authority is at. Now, InPhase does allow a more timely sharing of that data. It is tracked, and I understand that Helen Thomas, who leads that work for us, she's on the call, but that she's trying to work with Democratic Services to make that InPhase more accessible to members. But I think there is some issues with configuration, particularly with iPads. But the data, there is quite a lot of real-time data that should inform both performance and policy development and response. And I think that with the InPhase system, that is much more flexible and would allow more earlier and timely decisions than perhaps the previous system that the authority was using. I don't know if Helen wishes to add anything. I think she did respond to the point that Councillor Cushing said he raised at Cabinet along those lines. Thank you.
Officer Thomas.
I'm happy to step in there. Yes, the InPhase system will give you instant access. So the minute somebody puts some data in or puts an update in about a project, if you've flagged that up as something you're interested in, then you'll get an email to say that that information has been updated. For instance, that's just one of the features of the piece of software. I share your frustration at the moment because your iPads won't allow us to let you see InPhase absolutely up to date to the day that people are putting the information in. And the sooner that I'm working very hard with Democratic Services and IT to make it so that you can see it the instant the information is up to date in the same way that managers can at the moment. Thank you.
Can I just add,
Thank you.
Sorry, at the last monitoring performance report that we had, you had agreed that there would be a presentation on InPhase. Just to say, as Helen kind of alluded to there, we did have some discussion about getting that together. It really depended on the intranet working again on iPads, which we thought we had a fix for, but turned out to be short-lived. So we are definitely still working to get InPhase and the intranet working on iPads, and that briefing is wholly dependent on that. So as soon as we're there with the IT, we will bring that forward, so then you would be able to access, fingers crossed, InPhase on the iPads.
Okay, thank you for that, Matt. That's clearly an experience that we have yet to sample, and no doubt we'll have some views on that once we know what it offers. One of the concerns, and I know we have mentioned this before, one of the challenges I think that we have is that this report and you'll kind of see the swathes of information that's laid out on the many pages that makes up this report. I think, speaking more generally, not just about the task of this committee, but more generally for members, I think it's about trying to see the wood for the trees. We have had a discussion, and I think we've had an agreement in principle that for the future we should aim to produce an exceptions report, so that, okay, maybe I'm off the bletch. Am I treading a well-worn path, or is it one that
no,
has yet to be?
No, so I think for your completeness, there is, Helen can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there is, for each of the 6 corporate plan themes, there is progress shown against each of those key indicators or activities. But then on page 58, 59 to 61, and I can share with you that I was challenged by the leader of the council on this point. All of the indicators on there are red and don't make for very positive reading, but that is because that is an exceptions report. So your exceptions report is pages 58 through to 61. The other more mass of data that is shared is the performance against the objectives under the 6 corporate plan themes. I think that's right, Helen. Can you confirm?
Yes, I can just, that's absolutely correct. There is one additional thing. The key priorities that Cabinet agreed in October as the key priority objectives, and the current actions related to those are in a separate page as well. So if you're looking to focus in on what are the current key priorities, there is a section that just has the progress on the actions against those priorities as well. So that in a way is an exception report as well.
When you
is that from page 62 onwards, Helen?
No, that's very early on, quite early on. I'll have to have a look to see what page number that is. But
yes, we've got 2 sets of page numbers. That's the problem. Yeah. We've got the page numbers which are large, and that I think relates to your
agenda
intent. Well, that's the, I believe. Well, I'm not sure actually whether that's the agenda or the report number.
No, that's the agenda, Chairman.
Is it?
Yeah, the large figures are the agenda, and I was talking about the agenda pages 58 to 61.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, sorry to interrupt. My edition on my iPad has got lines all over it, and some of the sections aren't readable because the bold lines are crossing through them.
Do you have a hard copy, Councillor Housen?
I think that's an iPad configuration issue, which it might be the issue that Helen's talked about in terms of the iPads.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay.
It's page on in terms of the actual report, managing performance. It's page 4 is the key priorities section.
Okay. I think suffice to say that over the years, I have seen many performance reporting systems, both at district and county. and I think the challenge that nearly all of them have is in being able to present information in a way which members across the board don't find daunting, and that they are able to assimilate, particularly in those areas where performance is adrift. And that can be better than, as well as worse than the norm. And I just wonder if there is a piece of work to be done to try and distill out of what is an awful lot of information, the key information. And I just wonder whether there is a piece of work that
I think, Chairman, that the intention of the briefing, the member briefing or workshop, which Helen was able or prepared to deliver, I would hope would allow that conversation to take place and for members of this committee to express what data they would like to see and when. I think this new system is much more interactive than the 10 system that we had before. It's my expectation that it would meet your hopes and aspirations. I just think it perhaps isn't in a way or presented in a way yet which meets those. And I think 1 or 2 workshop events where Helen explains what the system is capable of would allow us to structure these reports on a periodic basis in a different way, which allowed that deep dive interrogation and explanation, if that would be helpful to you. I just because perhaps of COVID, perhaps because we're working remotely, I don't think we've been able to deliver that for you as yet, but Helen is able to do that. I just think we need to find an opportunity. Helen, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
I'd just like to add that the in-phase system is designed to be an interactive system and a user-friendly system. It can generate these written reports, as you've seen, but that's not what it ultimately was designed for. It's designed for to be an easy to navigate and use website where it's obvious, where you can click on a button and say, I only want to see the reds, and it'll show you the reds, or I only want to see the completed projects, and it'll show you all the completed projects. So it's designed to be interactive and easy to use in that way. And I'm very frustrated that I can't show it to you yet so that you can't start using it.
Thank you for that, Officer Thomas. That makes it sound very inviting. Certainly the prospect, turning to what you were suggesting, Officer Blatch, I think that there's certainly merit in having that opportunity. I don't know how other members feel, but if there is support for that, then I think that we should make sure that there is an opportunity for members to come forward with their proposals on how they would like to see, what they would like to see, and how they'd like to see it. Is that something that would attract you as part of that workshop? I'm getting a few thumbs up and a nodding of heads.
That was
yes.
what was intended. We are just waiting on that IT issue to be resolved. But,
Splendid. Well,
Matt, is it dependent? Can Helen deliver a workshop without the iPads in terms of an introduction or a taster? Or I mean, that wouldn't allow. I absolutely understand that wouldn't allow interactive engagement, and it wouldn't allow members to take away from that workshop and, you know, for want of a better phrase, play on their iPads. But in terms of Helen outlining the structure of the website and what it can do, I do see that there would be an advantage of that, even if it was then followed up by an interactive session. If the IT challenges can be overcome, if Helen's able to deliver that for you during January, I do see a lot of benefit in that.
Yeah, I think that could certainly be done, and then we can have another session once InPhase is actually working on the iPads. Yeah.
I'm happy to do that.
I'd propose, Chairman, that you perhaps do that, and Matt and Helen give you a date for some time, or agree with you a date sometime in January for that.
Okay, that would be very helpful, I think, because certainly from my perspective, it is about cutting out some of the clutter and seeing the real issues much more clearly than we currently are able. And I think that doesn't serve the authority well if we, as a scrutiny committee, can't easily access, if only it's to draw assurances that things are, you know, going swimmingly well. That is fine, and we would obviously want to try and highlight those things that are doing very well and those things which are doing less so, and that's what performance monitoring is all about, really. And I think at the moment we are somewhat hampered in achieving that objective, but it would be really good, and this would be a benefit, I'm sure, for everybody, officers and members, if we had that better level of clarity. Okay, so moving on to perhaps more detailed discussion about the report. Does anybody have any questions to raise in respect of any of those performance measures?
I did note that, Liz, you had a hand raised for a while. Is there anything you wanted to add at all?
No, that's fine. It was answered. Thank you in the conversation. Thank you.
Any other points that anybody wants to raise in relation to this report?
Wendy Fredericks has a raised hand.
I'd just like to say thank you to the officers for working so incredibly hard during this pandemic. The fact that we've got green ticks, we've got green stars, we've got a lot of the work that's been done, and it's all being held together by officers that are under an enormous amount of stress. So I'd like to thank the officers personally, and probably the committee would probably agree with that as well. Thank you.
Indeed, yes, I think that's widely, and I think the challenge that the officer team has is widely recognised, and I think probably the nature of our debate actually takes into account that some of the things that we've been asking for and will be asking for has to be seen in the context of the operational pressures that arise out of COVID in particular. So thank you for that. Okay, if nobody has any other questions they wish to raise, then we, I think, need to note this report and endorse the actions. Is that correct, Matt?
Yep, correct. Just noting this one, yep.
So as that's a raise of hands, if you do I have a proposer and a seconder, first of all?
It's not necessary for this one, Chairman.
No?
Just a raise of hands is fine.
Raised hands then.
Yep, duly noted.
Okay, thank you for that. Turning to item 12 on our agenda, which is the North Norfolk District Council's actions in the current phase of the coronavirus pandemic. Officer Blatch, is this one that you lead on, or?
Are you happy for me to take this, Leader?
Yes, I don't mind. I'm very happy for you to take it, or I can take it, whichever.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So the report is before you. It is for the period September through to the end of November. Obviously, this report has previously been presented to Cabinet at last Monday, the 7th of December. The report is before you. There are some updates which I can just go through if that would be helpful. Paragraph 1.3 are figures yesterday for declared for the 9th of December. These are updated every day, but there is a period of some backdating as people's tests come through. So nationally, the data is published 5 days in arrears. And so the figures for yesterday that were published by the UK government COVID data dashboard were for the 9th of December. Our figures then were 65 cases, or a rate of 62 per 100,000. That is slightly down in the last 3 weeks, where there was a single outbreak in a care home in North Norfolk, which did add quite large numbers to our underlying rate. And thankfully, those numbers have now passed and come off of our live or 7-day rolling average. And so we now are between 60 and 70, which is still at the upper end of what we had experienced up until October. But that is, we're still in an advantageous position relative to national rates and the Norfolk, we're below the Norfolk average. There does seem to be some slight increase in Norfolk over the last 14 days, and partners are mindful of that, and that has been reported in local media, but not at the rates seen in London and parts of the southeast. In terms of paragraph 2.2, the maintenance of the You Are Welcome reassurance programme, we've continued to promote local shopping in the run-up to Christmas buy local, support local independent retailers. We have also seen the introduction of 6 COVID support officers within our town centres to provide reassurance, to provide advice to businesses and to shoppers for advice about queuing. And because of the small size of many of our independent shops, we are seeing some queues outside of premises in recent days. Post offices, certainly in Cromer, post offices, card shops, people have been queuing outside because of the limited numbers that can be in some premises at this time. And our COVID support officers have been, the cost of those is being met through the Containment Management Fund provided by government. In terms of paragraph 2.5, as part of the England national lockdown, we did receive £5.2 million of local restriction support grants. And as of last Friday, this authority had paid in excess of £4 million of that grant funding out. That's 2,781 payments to 75% of eligible businesses, and government guidance has been increased in terms of the changing circumstances. There is now a wet-led pub scheme, and the team are now administering that and are working on the additional restrictions grant scheme, which will be launched in January. The teams, the figures show on the next page show the continued level of support which our housing team are providing to people who are either street homeless, rough sleepers, or in otherwise vulnerable housing circumstances. And we, under paragraph 2.7, under the test and trace support payments, we continue to pay those out, although that is at a relatively low level in terms of overall numbers. These are people that are on benefits or in work and have to self-isolate either because they've had a positive test themselves or they are a close contact of somebody that has had a positive test. And the final point under paragraph 2.9, officers continue to work with health partners in terms of the CCG to look at the introduction of the vaccination programme. Fakenham GP practice was the first in North Norfolk to offer vaccinations, and I believe that is from today. And we are working with strategic partners to plan for the provision of a small number of mass or large-scale vaccination centres early in the new year, subject to the supply of vaccinations in the early new year in accordance with the government's priority groupings. And we've been asked to plan for that for a period of at least 6 months. I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you for that. Councillor Mancini-Boyle, your hand is raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Blatch, on the question of the homeless and rough sleepers, it says that they're being put into shelters and what have you. I'm assuming that they have a COVID test prior to being moved by our teams, and I'm assuming that full protection will be given to our teams when they actually deal with the people.
That is my understanding, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions? Councillor Hasden?
Thank you, Chairman. A difficult question and a difficult one to answer, I think, but the district council, along with other district councils, have they made or created any forum to put pressure on the central government to stop movement from one county to another? Because I have neighbours who clean in holiday homes. They are currently refusing to clean in some homes because there are people here from Birmingham, from Manchester, from Leicester, and from London. And this is just exacerbating the whole problem. And until such time as we can get some control for people to stay within a restricted radius of their main residence, we have a significant problem. So my question really, is there a forum, is there a mechanism where pressure can be put on central government?
There's a challenge for you.
I think that might be a question for the leader to answer rather than myself. What I can say to you is late last night, after the Secretary of State's announcement that London and parts of Essex and Hertfordshire were to move into Tier 3, I have raised the issue of people travelling to second homes with strategic partners so that there is a coordinated response or communication strategy in place around that matter. But the substantive point, I think I will leave to the leader if that's okay.
Thank you, but that's good to hear.
Councillor Batikova.
Thank you, Mr. Blatch. I absolutely share Councillor Housden's concerns, and I think it's, you know, we have been trying, we raised this point again and again. You know, it was very noticeable last night when the Chief Executive raised this with the authorities across Norfolk, because our residents are concerned, and obviously if people are moving from one area to another, then they will be bringing it with them, or could potentially be bringing it with them. So we will continue to lobby central government. We do ask central government regularly to put boundaries in place. But the problem is then, how do you police it? Because unless you have got patrols on every road, people will find a way through. During the very early days of the pandemic, I was absolutely staggered to find one family from Leicester had posted their luggage to Norfolk, because if they'd got stopped in their way out of Leicester with the luggage in the car, they would have been fined. So they'd sent it ahead of them so that they could come on holiday. And it just, you know, if people are prepared to go to those lengths, then there is very little that we can do to prevent that. So we are doing everything we can. We will continue to lobby central government. I think, to be fair, I think both our MPs share this, concern, and are happy to try and work with us to do all we can to prevent that. I think the other thing I wanted to say that didn't really come out in the, it's written in the report, but Mr. Blatch didn't mention it, was one of the things that I think, I like to hope, has contributed here to our rates, is the fogging machines that we've deployed. Because they're used in all our very high touch public service areas, so like our public conveniences and on our car parking machines. And I was really, really shocked, I think it was 2 weeks ago now, when I spoke to the leader of one of the other districts in Norfolk, and he said to me, "What's a fogging machine?" And they weren't deploying them in that area. And I was really shocked by that, because I think, yes, it's an expense to the district, but we do have the money from central government to do all we can to protect our residents. And I do hope that is contributing. But that's only one part of the answer to your question. I wish I had a better answer for you, Councillor Housden, but all we can do is continue to lobby and work with our partners like the MPs to make sure the message is getting back.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the question and the responses. I think we kind of recognise the challenge that there is, not just locally but nationally, and as already been pointed out, this is not something that you can lay a set of rules down and that's it. Those rules have got to be complied with, and those rules, the compliance is down to the likes of every one of us across the country. And if individuals, and if there is a wide recognition or a wide resistance to comply, then the system will not work. And I wish one of us or anybody had an answer to that question, but it is one that I think will run and run. And I think, more to the point, I think that the relaxation that's planned for the Christmas period and how people indulge or otherwise in that will be interesting to see, because I think later on in the after Christmas, early January period, there may be a price to pay. And I hope that isn't the case, but I think that that does stand to undo some of the good work that's been done up to now. And I hope that every family reflects on what they really need to do, but that's a wider issue than this. But thank you for your presentation and responses. Any other questions in relation to this report? Councillor Mancini-Boel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When it comes to the mobile testing, I've noted that we're still just 2 days a week in the two car parks of Fakenham and Cromer. Is there any, do you think it might be prudent to maybe increase that, bearing in mind there's been a slight spike in the area and such a long sort of shutdown over Christmas? Is that something you'd consider, or is it maybe too late for that?
I'm happy to come up back on that, Mr. Chairman. I think,
go ahead.
I think, Councillor, we would always welcome increased testing. The problem we have in North Norfolk is a good one in a way, in as much as our numbers here are some of the lowest, and therefore the testing is focused in those areas that are seeing the higher numbers and the increased spike. And also knowing we did have that spike, but it was in a care home setting and it was in a controlled environment. The testing becomes even more important when we have community spread. So whilst I would welcome more testing, I do understand why we haven't got more at this time. But if the need arises, we will certainly be doing everything we can to push for more in the area. And I think the other thing is to let you know, I don't know whether you were able to attend Cabinet, but the testing process will continue throughout the Christmas period. There will be no let up, so that people, if they need a test, can go and get a test on Christmas Day.
Just to clarify, the question really was around whether, yes, the two, the mobile testing, whether they are still in place and will continue. So that
yes, they continue in Cromer and Fakenham for there is a programme advanced that's been shared. So it's my understanding they will continue, as the leader has said.
Thank you, thank you, Councillor Withington.
Just very quickly to say that the testing at Cromer is actually on Saturdays, Mondays, and Thursdays now, I believe, and various family members and local students I know have been able to obtain tests on the day and in advance with plenty of spaces available. So there's some good accessibility for us up here in North Norfolk, which was good to hear.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions in relation to the report? No? Okay. We are asked to note this, is that correct, Matt?
Yep, just a show of hands is fine.
Okay, so if we at that point, all discussions completed, a show of hands, please, to note the report.
Yep, noted.
Thank you. Moving to item 13, the Sheringham Leisure Centre project update for December. Do we have Officer Young presenting on that?
I'm here.
We have Councillor Gay.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Councillor Gay, would you like to introduce?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes. As you can see in the report ahead of you, work has been progressing on the Leisure Centre since May. We're still on track for phase 1 opening in August. And you will see that there was an assessment made at the town of Lockdown on the question of bringing forward demolition. And there was no financial advantage to doing that at that time. You can see that assessment within your report. You'll also note that the project team and the responsibilities for this project remain unchanged. There's been no alteration despite other ongoing changes in the council. I think from my point of view, we haven't been able to do everything in communications that we might have wanted to do. In particular, from the very beginning, there was an aspiration to use this project to raise awareness of professions and disciplines among young people in the district, because of course there are all kinds of people involved in this project, engineers, architects, lawyers, And this is something that Metnor has done in the Northeast, is promoting this sort of thing among young people. But we still have an aspiration to do that. It's just because of the circumstances we're in, we haven't been able to. The risk register picture for the project remains unchanged. So that's the story at the moment, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Questions for that? Councillor Housden?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Could I take you back to either the 16th September overview and scrutiny meeting or the 12th of August overview and scrutiny meeting, when we had a discussion where I asked if we could have more figures, either construction costs month by month, so we could see how the programme was going, how the costs were going, and whether we were over budget or under budget. There was some debate, and you kindly intervened and said, well, look, that might be a little bit too much information, but suggested we would have a filtered down version of what the construction phase was and the relevant costs to it, so we could draw more conclusive conclusions. That hasn't happened, and we've just got the reports that we've seen each time it's come to overview and scrutiny. That's the first thing. The second thing is the cost benefit analysis, which was undertaken, and I don't mean to be disrespectful with this, but it did come out of Sir Humphrey Appleton's Yes Minister book of assessment, sufficiently balanced to keep the status quo and not demolish early. But of course, as I believe Councillor Rest may have pointed out, the aspect and spectre of a second lockdown was in the offing, which we've had. We're now going to have, without doubt, another lockdown in January. This is going to get further behind programme, and it is going to lose more money than was projected originally, and we don't have those figures in front of us. So I want to see more information, please. This is a fundamentally large project, as Councillor Gay has just pointed out, and we need more information.
Thank you, Councillor Housden. I think the principle on which you've been given financial information, and of course anybody can ask for more information at any time, that's a perfect right of any councillor, is to see when what the progress is on the budget. And at the moment, as you can see here, the overspend remains pretty much the same as it was the last time I reported to you. So if there had been any significant change to that, that would have been reported to you today. And I have to add that actually it's pretty unusual for this amount of information to be reported, but we've always done that from the very beginning. But if you require further details, I mean, obviously, Mr. Young is on the call. Mr. Young is on the call today, and perhaps if you would write to him and say exactly what it is you want to know, we could provide you with that in writing. I'm sorry about the Sir Humphrey report. I'm not sure I agree that it was a Sir Humphrey report. And certainly the system was reassessed when we went into the second lockdown. That's clear in the paper. And as you know, and that the original report that you cited from September lays out clearly the 4 points at which this would be reassessed. So presumably, because construction work has carried on through these lockdowns, the construction work hasn't stopped. So presumably if there was another lockdown, there would be another reassessment. I think I think I can wholeheartedly say that to you. So that's the picture at the moment. I think that's as much as I can say. Clearly you don't find that.
I appreciate the response, but Mr. Chairman, correct me if I'm wrong, but was it not agreed that there would be more detail than was presumed previously revealed in the overview and scrutiny reports?
I certainly recall a discussion around the requirement or the request for more financial information, and I don't have chapter and verse, but I think the thrust of what you were after, Councillor Housen, is what you've articulated today, and I think it will be a matter for this committee to decide whether it wants to be a part of that wider set of information, or whether that's something that you should perhaps take up on a one-to-one basis, as it has been offered with Mr. Young. But I think substantially your request is a reasonable one, and you ought to be able to receive the necessary information to give satisfaction on that. I suspect on the second point with regard to the judgment on the report, that may be more subjective, but I think the thrust of that was that as the report stood at the time, there wasn't an economic argument which supported that, but the point that had been raised in triggering that piece of work still stood, in the sense that if there was another change of circumstances, whether it be COVID lockdown or some other event which would cause the path of that project to change, then that situation should be reviewed. And I think we were given that as an assurance at that time. Clearly, it is a matter for those directing the project and the administration to identify when those moments occur, but it's equally possible, of course, for this committee to take a view as well about whether an opportunity has occurred for a further review of whether that judgment is right or wrong. So, Councillor
Go
Gay.
ahead. Councillor Housden can carry on. I will wait for him. Thank you.
Councillor Housden.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gay. Well, first of all, we're talking about a £19 million project, which is a significantly large project. If there is a complete agreement that a further lockdown would trigger another review, then I think it's essential that that is the case. Because obviously we've got ongoing costs in the context of a pool which is not being used, and we're going through another winter, and we might have the similar problems of expenditure on that building as we had last winter. So I suppose really all I can say is if there's any chance, perhaps we could have a vote on whether we have more information coming through to overview and scrutiny. And I'm not quite sure that quarterly is right. I actually think we should have this monitored monthly, because it's a very critical project and we are going through a critical pandemic. We're in the middle of the winter, and I think with this amount of expenditure, we need to be exceedingly careful. We've had, comments today challenging budget, balancing the budget, and an economically challenging time. And I think we should use our ability to scrutinise, and this is not a criticism of officers, but it's a reflection of the size of the project that we're being asked to consider and scrutinise.
I think, yes, I understand the point that Councillor Housden is making, but perhaps it might be helpful if he would put in writing exactly what it is that he requires, because I think that might be useful.
Okay, I've got Councillor Cushing next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to endorse the points that Councillor Housden has made. I come from, I've managed project programmes in Aviva, and if you look at the amount of information we require on those small projects, it's usually what have you spent year to date, what have you planned to spend, why is there a variance there, where are those variances, what are the risks, and what is the forecast, what are the risks of those forecasts. And those, I mean, you're looking, as Councillor Housden made, this is by far the largest spend that this council has a massive investment, and I think it's wholly right that we should have certainly far more granular detail, and I would agree on a monthly basis as to where those costs are, because looking at the going forward, the precarious position of the council's budget, any slight movement in this is going to have a detrimental impact elsewhere. So certainly endorse what Councillor Hanson has said.
Thank you for that. Any other views on the merit of the proposals that Councillor Housden has made? Councillor Heinrich.
Sorry, I see Councillor Withington had her hand raised first.
Then Councillor Withington first.
Thank you. I think it's always good to have information, but what worries me about this conversation is that no one at any point has mentioned that these facilities apply a huge well-being aspect for our communities, and we are in after all, a health pandemic at the moment, and I think that has to be a huge part of this discussion. If you're going to start talking about, well, we're experiencing cost at Sheringham because of the lockdown, then the natural progression for that conversation is that those similar economic arguments apply to Victory and our other installations. And I don't think anyone here is considering that. So therefore, I do find it worrying that we are looking in, this conversation is being had about closing a well-being and vital service facility for a community at the moment. When you're not if that's your argument, then that goes across the district. And, I very much hope that no one, at district would even consider that. Therefore, I don't find it relevant to the Sheringham situation.
Just to clarify on that, as I understand it, it's not the proposal of Councillor Housden today that there should be an early closure, but if I understand it, the question of early closure and the merits of that were raised and were the subject of a report. That report found that there wasn't an economic argument for it to be closed early, and so that to that extent the situation was resolved, but the part of that piece of work was a recognition that the situation should be reviewed in the future should there be a change of circumstances. So I don't, unless Councillor Housden tells me otherwise, I don't interpret what he said as that it should be closed. The whole question of that would be reviewed at an appropriate time in the future. So I think we need to put that just to one side. Is that correct, Councillor Housden?
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Chairman. It's not a question of closing Splash as we sit here today. It's an issue that if we get into another lockdown, the building is going to be closed, and therefore we need to look at the viability, the cost benefit of getting it down at that point in time, because we will at that point, if the programme is held, be getting closer to the completion date anyway, and there will be an economic point when it's worth getting in there, getting the existing building down and opening the new facility as early as possible. Otherwise, we're going to have more and more delays, and it might not get open till April 2022. So it's not about closing it now, it's about taking pragmatic decisions for the future.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Heinrich.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. I'd have no problem with supporting a request to see some more detailed budget monitoring. I think we've possibly been a little bit lax in just taking a general report and not looking in more detail at the financials. As far as the existing Splash goes, it says that yes, we ought to keep an eye on what's going on. But I can't see any likelihood that within the timescale of the completion of the new building and any impact of any lockdown, and if it ends up as a tier 3 lockdown, the gym part will stay open in any case, that we're likely to gain very much, but put us to a lot of work. And as Councillor Williams has said, we have to keep in mind the well-being of our residents who, when the facility is open, will make use of it and need to make use of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Gay?
Sorry, I was just checking my participants list to raise a hand. Thank you, Chairman. How may I make a suggestion? It's just a suggestion. How about if we do a monthly report, for example, next month, and you will recollect that previously Councillor Housden has submitted questions in advance of the meeting. He's done that before. So we schedule this discussion to take place again in a month's time with questions from Councillor Housden in advance of the meeting. So I can do my best to make sure that answers are presented. Would that be of any help to you, Chairman?
Thank you, Councillor Gay. That may be, if I just sort of interpret that a little bit, that would give Councillor Housden the opportunity of writing down the detail of the information that he would like, and for that to be understood by officers, and for the matter to be brought back to our January committee for a further discussion and an update on where the project is. Is that correct?
That's what I'm suggesting. I don't know whether it's acceptable to you or not.
Councillor Housden.
No, I want the committee to see it, Mr. Chairman. This is a committee issue, not my personal issue.
Yeah, the committee would see it in January. The point, I think, is that today, rather than take up too much time in discussion, clearly, I think what you've raised so far has considerable merit. And I think that needs to be detailed, sharpened up into a request to officers, and that would be shared with committee members. That can be shared with committee members. Committee members can even have an opportunity of adding to that if they wish to, commenting on it. But then that would be acted upon by officers in producing the necessary figures and facts for our January meeting. That would be then open to discussion by the committee.
That is exactly what I was suggesting, Chairman. I wasn't suggesting that Councillor Housden get some kind of private answer. I mean that we'd receive the questions in advance and the answers could be prepared for the committee for the January meeting. But as I say, I don't know whether that's acceptable or not. It's just the most practical suggestion I can make at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Housden.
Well, what do other members of the committee feel about it?
Well, I think first of all, I think you've raised a very reasonable question, and if that arrangement, I think we probably would like to know whether you would find that as a suitable way forward in the first instance.
Extremely reluctantly.
Well, Chairman, I think I need to know what it is, what exactly what financial reports or papers or spreadsheets or whatever it is that Councillor Housden is going to require.
Come in here, Virginia. I just looked back at the previous minutes, and I think Rob might be able to support this as well. I see his hand raised. The original request was for a budget profile to be included. I've noted that Rob has had his hand raised for some time. I don't know if he wants to come in here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Gay. Mr. Young.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. I really wanted to come in to put on public record. I heard Councillor Housden say that the project was 19 million. I don't think I misheard that. I'd like to put that straight, and the papers clearly outline the budget, which was the original budget was 12,697,139, and the current position is 12.832 million. So that's for the record. If I could just outline also a comment which he made in relation to the programme, and to clarify that the completion and opening of the new facility is not dependent upon the demolition of the old one. So we will find a position in relation to the existing programme whereby the new leisure centre will open in August. following that, the demolition of the old one will take place and the completion of the car park. And that's perfectly able to be achieved because we are using a temporary car park and we've got sort of temporary arrangements in place. So there is no dependency there on the timing of demolition. And also to point out, without going into details, well, I'd be happy to if you had any further questions. The decision about an earlier demolition is really a balance between the costs of maintaining the splash and essentially the cost of the leisure contract versus any cost increases for any delay or overrun of the phase 2 of the new centre, which is the demolition. So we've got this position. If the leisure contract is costing us a lot, and for example, the splash isn't open, then it doesn't make any sense for us not to demolish it. The November lockdown was brief. It was only a month. Our leisure operator opened as soon as they possibly could after that, as soon as they were legally allowed to. And because of furlough and the other provisions that were in place, the contract wasn't costing us a great deal more, if any more, as a result of that. So the balance didn't change as a result of that lockdown. If there is another lockdown which prevents gyms and leisure facilities from opening, we will of course review the position again. And I think in the report that was previously presented to Cabinet, there was another trigger point, which was sometime at a convenient point, not too late in the programme, but before the completion of the new leisure centre, so that if there is an opportunity for staff to transfer, for example, without redundancies taking place, and without costs for the leisure operator. So if there is an opportunity for a hiatus, which is not terribly costly, but it's beneficial in order to facilitate an early demolition, then that's what we would do. But that's another trigger which was in that programme, which was previously reported. But again, I'm very happy with the suggestion which Councillor Gay made to report answers to any detailed questions. I would, however, be loath to report monthly cash flow figures because they are complex. They are highly kind of dependent upon the stage of the works. So what I have been doing to you is reporting the budget profile in essence, and whether we predict that the budget is, whether we're going to achieve the project within budget. And as you can see at the moment, there is a slight overspend. There are possibilities that we will be able to find further savings which would reduce that predicted overspend. The reason that we have maintained that in this report is because we want to maintain a contingency. So we don't want to squeeze out all of the contingency at this point. We still think we need to retain a contingency in the budget. Those are the kinds of things which I'd be happy to expand upon at your request at future meetings, if I can come prepared with the answers to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Councillor Gay?
I just wanted to say, yes, exactly. There were 4 conditions put at which this would be reassessed. Further lockdown was one of them. But as you can imagine, weather events and some sort of failure at Splash was another of them. So this is an open question under constant reassessment. It's not as though people have gone away and forgotten about that September paper. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that. So I think we've got a situation where I think there's, sorry, Councillor Mancini-Boyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be quite brief on this. I hear from both councillors of both their views, and may I suggest that when we do get more information, that we actually get maybe a brief presentation from the contractors on progress of how they're getting on, because I understand our councillors are quite gemmed up on this, but I think the contractors it'd be beneficial for all of us to see exactly how they are getting on in some sort of a slideshow, just so we're kept more informed, because I get quite frustrated. I hear these reports, but I don't actually know what's going on. It would be beneficial for me anyway to see the actual progress. I don't know what Councillor Gay would think of that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Gay.
I think that's a good idea. I think, no, I don't know whether the construction company, whether Metnor could do that at the present time, but I would have thought a general update on what's been done, what remains to be done in the months between now and August. I think that might be helpful. There's a certain amount of information on the website, and you will remember that some of us went to visit the project several weeks ago, and there were some nice videos made. Felix made some lovely videos which have been put on the council's website and are available for everyone to see, and things went out on Facebook. But yes, I think it might be nice to have an update on just the construction. How close is it to the end in terms of what's been done and what remains to be done? If that would be helpful, Councillor Mancini-Boyle, I don't see a problem. I don't know who could do it, but
I appreciate that. I don't expect a full video of it like The Godfather or something like that. It would just be nice to have a brief presentation every now and again, just so because I have problems at the moment getting onto the website with my iPad anyway, so I've got to go and and it's quite frustrating. So if we could just maybe combine everything with a brief summary of the finances of it, the 12 million, and maybe a short video or something, I would greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
I will go around and talk to some people and see what can be done. It doesn't sound like an impossible request to me. Thank you.
Chairman, you're on mute.
Councillor Batikova.
Thank you. I'd just like to reassure Councillor Mancini-Boyle, I actually had occasion to drive past the site again just at the weekend. And I have to say, I was really impressed to see how much progress has been made since we paid our visit a couple of months ago. So I think, yes, I mean, I appreciate not every member is in this part of the district all the time. So I think, yes, some pictures and video would be a really good idea to share with all members so that they're able to see just how well it is progressing, because it is starting to really take shape.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So just trying to draw this, Councillor, yes, Councillor Housden.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, just a final point. Spreadsheets and budgets for this are not complex. 20 years ago, I was dealing with £20 million budgets on spreadsheets and virtually having to write them out by hand. So I do understand what a budget is and what a spreadsheet is and what a contract profile is and the details of a programme. And yes, I would like to see it, please.
Okay, thank you for that. So just to try and draw this discussion to a conclusion, I think we've got three substantive recommendations. I'll take the last one first, which is basically that we have a site progress update in January next year. So that will be hopefully a mostly visual and a briefing, but mostly visual, to show us what's actually happening on the site, what's happened and where we are. That will add, I think, an important dimension to our overview of the project. The second is that we do, in fact, ask for a report in January. So we did say when we settled for the 3 monthly that at any time, if we had any concerns, we would change that and revert back to monthly. By, I think, dint of the conversations that we're having today, there is some concern, and there is a request to report back in January. There's the third one is for the additional budget information, which Councillor Housden has outlined. And in order to make sure that we're not disappointed come January, would you be willing, Councillor Housden, just to outline in detail to Mr. Young what exactly it is that you are looking for, and copy the committee members in once you've agreed that with Officer Young, so that we know what will be lined up for us to see in January?
Yes, quite happy to do that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So there are 3 substantive recommendations there, which I would put to you as a committee to form a view about. Does anybody have any disagreements with those? No? Okay, fine. Thank you very much. Matt, are we required to note and then make recommendations in relation to this report?
Yeah, I assume if we have a proposer and a seconder, you're assuming that the report is very much noted and commented upon when you vote on the new recommendations.
Okay, so in terms of a proposer, Councillor Howson, would you be comfortable to propose those 3 recommendations?
Yes, absolutely.
Councillor Cushing, would you be prepared to second? Thank you. Could we then have a vote then, which will note the report and agree these 3 recommendations?
Okay, so I'll just, sorry, Christopher, did you want to say something?
Oh, sorry, I was getting enthusiastic about those.
Okay, I'll just go for the roll call as usual. Councillor Dixon?
For.
Councillor Withington?
For.
Councillor Fredericks?
For.
Councillor Heinrich?
For.
Councillor Housden?
For.
Councillor Mancini Boyle?
For.
Councillor Spagnola?
For.
Councillor Varley?
For.
And Councillor Cushing?
For.
Okay, so they're unanimously agreed.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the robust discussion. I think we've probably got to where we want to be on that, and we look forward to the January meeting to have a more detailed discussion. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I am sorry, I have to depart now, as mentioned earlier.
That's understood. Thank you for your attendance today, Councillor Cushing.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Can we turn to item 14 then? This is the terms of reference for the scrutiny panels for the corporate plan. Matt, would you like to lead on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you see before you today is essentially a draft terms of reference for the proposed scrutiny panels. As I understand it, there is also a proposal going forward that Cabinet would have essentially parallel panels that would allow any kind of project or corporate plan priority issues to be discussed at amongst Cabinet members, and then those discussions could take place within the scrutiny panels. Obviously, what I would caution here is this is very much a draft terms of reference, so they're here today for your comment and approval. So you'll see I've provisionally grouped the 6 corporate plan themes into 3 groups. That's fully up for discussion, whether you agree with the way they've been grouped. Other things to note perhaps is that we suggested that each panel should be politically balanced with 5 members. It suggested that the chair of those working groups or panels, as we're referring to them, should be a member of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee that would be appointed by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So I'm not suggesting today that we do that. I think it's going to be perhaps some months with Christmas and everything that's happening with COVID before we get any reports that would perhaps go to these panels. It's just about agreeing the terms of reference. Perhaps we can have a think about which scrutiny members would like to potentially chair the specific panels, perhaps on themes they're interested in, and then at a future meeting we can make those appointments, and then in future once we start to have those more detailed reports come forward that are not perhaps not necessarily not appropriate for scrutiny committee, but would be better discussed in more detail by the panels and then reported back to the committee, then we can look to do that in the new year. So I open that for really discussion amongst members. I note that Steve has put something in the chat there about Cabinet Working Party. I don't know if he wants to just speak to that effect.
Okay, thank you for that, Matt. I've got two. I see Councillor Batikofa has had a hand raised earlier. Did you want to speak at this point or after Mr. Blatch?
I can let Mr. Blatch speak first. I'm not, I don't know whether Mr. Blatch wanted to speak on this item.
Thank you. Mr. Blatch, do you wish to speak on this item?
I wasn't intending to, but I'm not sure that the discussion is moving forward in the way that was previously agreed or explained to myself. So my understanding was that there is value in these panels. It would allow better engagement and use of overview and scrutiny committee's time. I think that should add value to the work of the council in terms of the corporate plan. And there is the paper that I presented to Governance, Risk and Audit Committee on the 8th of December regarding new project management arrangements, and those issues would need to be carried forward through the Constitution Working Party, and it would be my expectation that this should move forward in that wider context. So the Cabinet, in around that governance, project management and governance arrangements, for major projects, it is proposed that there would be a Cabinet Working Party that was formally constituted, recorded, and that would oversee delivery of major projects. In some ways, that might address some of the issues that you've discussed in the previous discussion around the Sheringham Leisure Centre, but again, to add value and for, I mean, obviously, Councillor Gay has fronted that discussion this morning and would continue to do so, but that there would be a formal record of cabinet discussions around those sort of projects as well. But I think in terms of that project management governance, the Governance, Risk and Audit Committee paper, the position paper that internal audit did on project management and oversight, that there is a wider conversation that needs to be had. And I think that conversation should take place probably in the first quarter of next year, and any revised arrangements would best be introduced at the annual meeting of council in May. So I don't think I've got anything further to add in terms of, I think, an early meeting in the new year between the leader of the council, yourself, Chairman, and Councillor Rest as Chair of the Governance, Risk and Audit Committee would be useful to agree or discuss how we might move forward in a way which delivers more efficient ways of working and adds value to the council's work. Because the first three items that you've discussed this morning are just reports that have already been to cabinet, and that to me seems out of step. 9 days later, where is the added value from that? And I don't think we are working smart enough. I mean, I've offered, and you've taken up that offer, that we can share more around the car park data, so that you can inform policy development or make recommendations to cabinet. And I would rather see that we worked in that way moving forward, rather than perhaps ONS playing catch up in discussions which have already taken place at cabinet. But I say that, and I lay that on the table for people to respond to. But I think that's the conversation that would be useful to have early in the new year. Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to speak.
Yeah, thank you for that. Councillor Batikofa.
Thank you. I think, what Mr. Blatch has just said is really important. There is work, very useful work that can be done by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. There is an awful lot of talent on our backbenches, and getting them involved at an earlier point in working with us on reports would be, I think, a very much better use of their time than going over reports that have already been seen by other committees, and basically all they're doing is noting the reports. So I would like to see us work with the Constitution reworking that's being done, and to move it forward so that council members get a better chance to have an input into the policies as they're being developed and brought forward through the process that way. I think that is far better use of your time, but that is for you, obviously, to decide, Mr. Chairman. I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but I'm just saying I think, it would be better use of all your time, as we said with the car parks this morning. And there are projects coming forward next year, which I think it would be really, really useful to have the help of this committee with, things like looking at the redevelopment of our taking forward of our public convenience work and deciding on that, looking at the car park strategies going forwards, all those sorts of things. I think there's quite a lot of work that can be done by this committee that could actually add quite substantial value. And I think, it would be very useful if they could do that work. So, and that would be part of the corporate plan, because it will be themes that will be under the corporate plan. So it will still join up. So that's
our two environmental policy officer and the climate change projects officer have also joined us in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And whilst the cabinet have a list of project proposals or thoughts or plans around that, I think the Overview and Scrutiny Committee panels could help shape some of that work and work with those two officers as well in terms of that conversation which the leader has outlined.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you for your respected inputs. And I think we have recognised with a number of examples over recent months where we can work more effectively across a number of committees in handling business and reducing duplication, handling business more efficiently. And I would hope that this model, which would enable this committee to spread its capability, increase its capability of looking at work and involve backbenchers, as the leader has said, in a way which is more constructive and meaningful than present, because these panels will give scope for non-scrutiny members to be a part of that, and some may well have some very good specialist skills that they can bring to those panels. So the whole concept of setting up these 3 panels and clustering them in the way that's proposed is in order to try and to add value to the processes and to give more opportunity to be more proactive in terms of pre-scrutiny. That's what we've called it up to now. Pre-scrutiny is what pretty much this committee has done as a complete committee, but these panels give the committee the ability to break that down into smaller groups and cover more work in greater detail than currently we are able to do. So I hope that this proposal is kind of seen in that light and will take us in the common direction that I think we've agreed to go. So that's very useful. I've got a hand from Councillor Heinrich.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just wondering whether this is a little bit premature at this stage, given that the Constitution is in the process of revision and will come into place in its new form in the beginning of the next civic year. Is also the fact that we have this new performance management structure that was agreed by GRAC. I think I prefer to wait and see how those 2 issues pan out before we dive in with this particular approach. Maybe we will need to modify this. The broad concept is fine. I have no difficulty with that. But I just think we're a little bit early with it until we know exactly how the constitutional changes will impact on the work we need to do as a scrutiny committee, and how the project management structures will give us more information to which we will have data to respond to. So I broadly support, but I think we are a little bit premature, and certainly we should not be bringing this in until the new council year. Thank you.
I think in practical terms, and Matt, you may be able to say more on this, the practical putting this into practice is not going to happen early in the new year and won't happen until the Constitution has recognised what it is that the council wants to be done, and also until those themes have reached the stage where they've got work that can be properly processed and transacted, and that may be some months off yet. But I think this was an idea to try and get ahead of the or get at least something in outline so that it could be in place when it's required. Matt, would you wish to add to that?
Yeah, I think you're right there, Chairman. I would just say, obviously, this is only agreeing a loose terms of reference. How those panels actually function, I think, with reference to what Steve and Sarah said, is really up to the members. It would be, I think, definitely beneficial for them to focus more on pre-scrutiny as opposed to looking at reports that go through the cabinet cycle, because as we all know, it's more of a not necessarily a tick box exercise. That's a bit pessimistic, but it doesn't allow committee to have as much input. So I think, yeah, like you say, this is really just making sure that we're ready for when those reports and that new structure does begin, that the panels are there and we can be in a position where we're not then looking at having a 2-3 month setup process. We can begin that work as soon as we're ready to do that.
Okay, thank you. I don't know whether Officer Blatch or Councillor Batikova wish to add anything to that, but I think that this is kind of getting in readiness and going in a direction which I think we kind of recognise, and we also do need to have a discussion early in the new year, particularly for those the GRAC, Scrutiny and Cabinet, so that we can harmonise and make sure that we are working as efficiently and as effectively as we can. And that does mean reducing duplication where that is not appropriate and doesn't add value to the processes. Any other comment?
I've nothing further to add, Chairman. I'd welcome hearing from other members of the committee, because I think that can then inform the conversation that takes place early in the new year.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So I've got Councillor Fredericks and Councillor Withington.
Thank you. I think this is really very premature, and hearing what we've heard today about the reporting system and also the constitution, I wouldn't want to support it now. I think what Paul said make really good sense. So if we could revisit that at a later stage, then that's okay. Speaking personally as well, I want input on all of that. I don't want and my time is really stretched as it is, and I'm sure our officers' time is as well, and we are in a pandemic, and I'm just wondering how much officer time this will take up. So if we could defer this until we can understand the management reporting system a little bit better, I think that would be more useful to us than actually voting on this now when we might actually not need it. But yeah, I would certainly want to be in all of these committees. Sorry, my dog wants to go out. So I second what Councillor Heinrich has said.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Withington.
Not going to repeat things, but I'm in agreement with Wendy and Paul. My concerns, which I know you are aware of, because I have discussed them with you, is I really want us to move to this idea of pre-scrutiny and an improvement for the council, rather than being a finding fault session post completion of things. Yes, we can learn from how we've done things, but I think it's far better to get it done in advance and have something of a better quality go forward, of greater benefit for the community. My concern with this one as well is that it lengthens the process in the way that this would be managing, and I think some of the things we've been dealing with happen quite quickly. And we need to be able to have that bit of flexibility and manoeuvrability, and reinforce what Wendy has said, in that I think it's really important as scrutiny that we are aware of everything and we have that bigger picture. We're talking today about how things link together, how GRAC with the project management framework within phase, that could throw up a whole different set of issues for us in the way we want to work. We've got environmental policy officers coming on board, which is all new. We've got the new constitution. These are all intermeshed, and I think it's very dangerous actually to break it down into very small parts and just be a few people. I think our strength in Scrutiny is that we have a range of perspectives from different parties, from different passions, from different sectors of the community. And I think that's our biggest strength as Scrutiny. So I personally cannot move, and I have listened to the arguments that have been put forward today. But I don't, for me, this isn't the right time. There's too many other balls up in the air that need to be caught first before we can decide how we want to move forward.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments?
See, Councillor Rest has a raised hand.
Councillor Rest.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Really, just to reference the fact that GRAC was mentioned, and just to, I mean, I understand some members' point of view, but the point is what the Chief Executive has said, what the leader has said, what you yourself have endorsed. This is something not new. We've been looking at this for a little while, and it is repetitious of what we see in some of the papers. It takes so much time. You know, one member is criticising the fact that we do things quickly. We don't do things quickly. We do things slowly and yes, carefully, but we need to move it quicker. Not every member wants to attend every meeting. I know that from GRAC. People are saying here they don't know what's going on. Well, attend the meeting. If you want to know what's going on, attend the meeting and ask a question. We will allow anybody, like this chairman does. You can speak. You don't have to be on the committee. So from my point of view, and I have to say from GRAC's point of view, I fully endorse the fact of what they want to do. I think you should do it now. I don't think you should wait. The longer you wait, the more that it delays it. Just let's get on with it. And the ideas that will come out possibly from combining some of these together and stopping repetition will help with the Constitution in the way it wants to go. And thank you again for letting me speak.
No, thank you for that. Anybody else? Anybody else like to speak on this?
I just note, refer everyone to something Democratic Services Manager has just put into the chat, that the committee had already agreed to establish these panels in February. So it's not necessarily the style of how these panels work is still open for discussion. It's just agreeing a loose terms of reference so that we're ready when these reports do come forward. I think what John was alluding to is that we don't want to defer things to a point that once we have a report, which could come for pre-scrutiny, often the period or the time frame you get for pre-scrutiny is quite limited prior to approval. So it'd be about just having a terms of reference ready so that when that work does begin to come forward, we're in a position where we can move on it quickly and make best use of time.
Thank you for that. And one shouldn't forget that the decision on whether work should go to a sub committee, should go to one of these panels, is for this committee to decide. So the other point I think that's probably relevant is that this isn't a new concept of operating. Work panels were introduced during, I think it was 2017-18, certainly before my time of being on Scrutiny, when panels were first formed in order to enable the committee to cover a greater range of work and to plumb to depths that the committee as a whole was unable to do. So if you're feeling uncomfortable about the concept has already been used before. Control of the panels is very much in the hands of this committee, not nowhere else. If you wanted to stop them, if you wanted to control, you have control over the work that will go to them. You have ultimate control. Those panels will report back to this committee. Whatever it is they discuss and come to whatever conclusions they think appropriate, they will be discussed by this committee. So if that gives in a measure of assurance about it, I don't know, but any views?
I see Councillor Heinrich had his hand raised first. Apologies.
Yep. Okay, Councillor Heinrich first.
Thank you, Chairman. As I said earlier, I've got no problem with the overall terms of reference, but it's the timescales in relation to the new constitution that have worried me. Would a solution be that I propose that we accept the terms of reference, but that on the proviso they will not be implemented until the new constitution provides further advice? I'm sure Matt can word that in a better way than I have, but.
Thank you for that. Yes, Matt, do you have a view on whether you could word it better than
I think what Paul is alluding to really, and I think this is not really a bad idea. Even with the terms of reference agreed, we don't necessarily have to move forward with those scrutiny panel meetings until that new project management structure is in place and agreed, which I think is what Steve and Sarah alluded to as well. So, yeah, even if the draft terms of reference are agreed, we're not suggesting by any means that there'll then be a meeting in the next few months. We're still very much waiting for. I think we're talking here about the corporate delivery unit, that type of stuff to be in place before we move forward. Steve, did you want to add anything to that?
I think it's absolutely recognised that the principle of panels is a sound one, that it would add capacity to the work of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee and allow more constructive, collaborative pre-scrutiny and engagement, which has to be positive in terms of taking forward the agenda of the Council. I think we just need to understand how they relate to issues which have been raised through the project management internal audit position paper, which has been reported to GRAC, and around which there was a series of actions which was included again by the internal audit manager on the 8th of December GRAC agenda, and how we align those things so that we bring those things together. And it's in that context that I think some of this does need to be considered in the early part of next year, possibly with the Constitution Working Party, so that we can be collectively agreed on how we move forward with increasing our organisational capacity, reducing duplication and maximising efficiency in taking forward the corporate plan objectives, the delivery plan priorities, in a context which, you know, means that over the last 9 months, and certainly for the next 3 to 6 months, our organisational capacity will have been reduced due to COVID. So it is around increasing that capacity and maximising the contribution of all 40 members of the council in a way which is constructive, positive, and allows us to move forward and deliver for the communities across North Norfolk in the way that Councillor Rest outlined. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I couldn't have said it better. Councillor Mancini-Boyle, and then Councillor Housden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I mean, I remember the ONS meeting we had when this first came up, and we voted through that it would be a good idea. And I think it is a good idea. I think it can be implemented at any time, because my understanding of a subcommittee is a group of people getting together, discussing something, researching it, and actually then bringing it to ONS, rather than having to leave it on the day where the one agenda item is discussed for 20 minutes or so with only maybe 1 or 2 officers. Whereas if you have a subcommittee, you've got more expertise, more input, and more work on into the subject. So I think it's a good idea, and it will stop clogging up ONS. And as I think Steve has said, we'll get through far more stuff and quicker and, you know, slicker. I just think it's a great idea.
Thank you. Councillor Housden.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think the sooner we get the structure in place, the better, because then we can be ready to help and go forward with it. So the quicker, the better, as far as I can see with the structure.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Fredericks, did I overlook your hand earlier, or?
No, well, I would like to speak.
My apologies anyway.
That's all right, don't worry, I've got to zoom off in a moment. Again, I don't know, that it's something still doesn't sit right, that I think we really need to listen to Paul's proposal again and vote on that, because from my point of view, I'd like to be really clear about what these are, and having a discussion with yourself, Nigel, and John Rest and the leader and Steve, I think would be beneficial, and then come back to us again and talk to us about it. I don't know, something doesn't, to use your word, uncomfortable about something. So I would just really welcome the opportunity to hear Paul's proposal again, and maybe after you've had a chat with the leader and Steve and also John, to come back with a little bit more flesh on the bones, because obviously from my point of view, as I said, I want to know everything. I want to have an input on everything, and I am worried about our officers' time. Yeah, I am nosy, Steve, and so I would really welcome the opportunity to hear that again, and for you to have a chat with those officers. That would be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Your discomfort is duly noted. If I just go back to Councillor Heydrich's proposal, my understanding was that he proposed that in principle we accept these draft terms of reference, but we hold from any implementation of the panels until the constitution matter has been resolved. Is that correct?
That's a good summation, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. So on that basis, are we able to, are we required to make this is a decision for the committee? Is that right, Matt?
Yeah, you would need to take a formal vote on that. Obviously, you would be required to have a seconder as well.
Yes, of course. So can I have a proposer and seconder? I've got Councillor Heydrich. I presume we would propose it.
Correct, Chairman.
Seconder. I've got two hands. Councillor Varley, I think your hands was marginally in advance. So could we go to the vote then, please?
Okay, Councillor Dixon.
4.
Councillor Withington.
4.
Councillor Fredericks.
4.
Councillor Heinrich.
4.
Councillor Housden.
4.
Councillor Mancini Boyle.
Against.
Councillor Spagnola.
4.
Councillor Varley.
4.
And Councillor Cushing has left. Okay, so that's agreed.
Thank you all. Sorry, I'm going to have to go.
Sorry, Nigel, you're muted.
Yes, thank you, Wendy. That's thank you for attending today.
Thank you, and have a great Christmas, everyone. See you later. Bye.
Thank you. Moving to item 15, which is the Cabinet Work Programme. Over to you, Matt.
Yep, the main thing to update here really is that I believe because the budget and MTFS is coming for pre-scrutiny prior to approval at Cabinet in February, that there's not really much need for a Cabinet meeting in January. So that does mean that we won't be seeing reports that have already been seen, which I suppose is good, which is the way people wanted to move. So that will be a full kind of pre-scrutiny session of the budget, as has been the practice of the past few years. I do believe, I think it was expected that the communication strategy would come or go to Cabinet in January. Whether that means that it's delayed for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee as well, I don't know. There'd need to be a discussion really between the chairman and the leader whether you'd like to see that come to pre-scrutiny or whether it comes post Cabinet. I think that's everything to note on the Cabinet work programme.
Thank you. Moving on to the scrutiny work programme.
Yep. So just looking at January, obviously, I think there's going to be a bit of movement there. We've agreed today, or the committee has agreed today, to have a splash report come back to the January meeting, in addition to what was just mentioned about that communication strategy, and also whether we're going to be in a position to bring the equality and diversity policy forward for pre-scrutiny at that time. I don't know if it's going to be in a draft form ready for that January meeting or not. So I think it will still be a substantial meeting with pre-scrutiny of the budget, that splash discussion and the MTFS. Whether we have those items just mentioned remains to be seen. The only other thing to note is I've heard back from the Police and Crime Commissioner, and he's essentially agreed to attend the March Overview and Scrutiny meeting to give a briefing on tackling domestic abuse during the pandemic. And I think that's everything on the work programme.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from anybody regarding the Cabinet or the panel work, the Scrutiny Committee work programmes?
See, Councillor Housden has a raised hand.
Councillor Housden.
Yeah, just quickly, something I might have missed, Mr. Chairman. Did we have something on ambulance response times coming into overview and scrutiny?
So I'm not sure if you potentially missed the meeting where that came back. We made a number of recommendations to NHOSC, which were then communicated to East, I believe, at that meeting. I sent you the minutes of that meeting. It was agreed, in principle, to continue to monitor NHOSC's monitoring of that situation. I know that Sarah, the leader, has also been involved in monitoring that at a more of a parish and town council level. I think it remains to be seen really whether that comes back to the committee in the future. It's something we're certainly keeping our eye on. Sarah, did you want to add anything to that?
I was just going to say, I mean, if the committee would like it, I'm sure that the lady who is leading that work, Dr. Halliday, would be very happy to come and give you you will need to give her some time constraints probably, but I'm sure she'd be very happy to come back and talk to you on it.
If I recall, she has spoken to the committee at a much earlier time, so there is that opportunity. But I think just to answer your question, I think, Councillor Harrison, yes, we did discuss it at a previous meeting. It was our decision previous to that to rely on HOSC taking the matter forward on our behalf, more on a county-wide basis. We were also mindful when we had that discussion, the Ambulance Trust had fallen into special measures, and that so the intensity of, if you like, performance scrutiny was probably about as high as you are likely to get it. Now, that didn't necessarily satisfy the matter of North Norfolk, but at this point in time, or at the point in time when we had the discussion, we felt that asking the trust to come before our committee probably wasn't going to be proportionate and the most helpful thing to do at that point in time. And therefore, we left it to the situation that Matt has described.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. I remember some level of discussion, and I must admit either I've missed something or it had just gone to the back of my mind. But thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
Just to add, I think Sarah has noted there quite rightly that the North Norfolk response times are the worst in the county, and it is important that we keep our eye on this. Obviously, the trust going to special measures has moved their priority somewhat. So I think we just need to keep a really good eye on what NHOSC are doing with that, and if it, if there is an opportunity for them to come to the committee in the future, then that can be arranged at an appropriate time.
Indeed. Okay, any other comments regarding the work programmes? Councillor Withington?
The only thing I'd like to say is I think we've got several new members, haven't we, on this committee now who haven't listened to the good doctor speaking about that. So it might be useful for everyone to be in the same position to hear where we are.
Indeed, that's an opportunity there that's been offered today. So we'll look at slotting that at some time in the new year. Okay. Any other comments? Are we all done on those two work programmes? Are we happy to note those, please? A show of hands to note those. Okay. Thank you. There are no other items on our agenda today. So it just remains for me to thank everybody for their input and to wish you all the very best for the festive season. And thank you again for today. Bye-bye.